Hello and welcome. This is the Goalers AFL podcast with myself, Caleb up here, and we are going to be chatting about round 15 and do a little bit of a preview of round 16 because I am aware that this is coming out in the latter part of the Tuesday after the footy round, which we do apologise because sometimes life is getting in the way. And it was a little bit of a busy weekend. I'm sure Caleb had a lot of things going on and you probably watched a lot of footy. How are you going?
Yeah, good. I was going to say it was busy Saturday and Sunday where some huge results happened. So I was disappointed I wasn't able to watch them live, but I've since gone back and watched the highlights of those monumental games.
Yeah.
And I'm, of course, referring to Carlton and the Gold Coast Suns.
Yes.
But obviously, Thursday, Friday night footy delivered some interesting footy as well. So we're going to get straight into all of it and get dissecting right now. So, Harry, let's just start with Thursday night footy.
We had Freo versus Essendon over in the West. It was, I think, within the 2-week span of Optus Stadium, they had, I think, 4 games, 3 AFL games and 1 State of Origin game, which was...
and the Socceroos as well.
Yeah, and didn't do very good for the turf there. But anyway, the Freo Dockers didn't let that stop them and they trounced the Essendon Bombers. Can we stop putting Essendon at prime time, please?
I know, right?
I think that the whole point of a fixture, schedule release is that Essendon, come on, what are we doing? Putting them at prime time Thursday night? No one wants to watch that. I mean, we're all down. We're down with football on Thursday nights, but not with Essendon. So this was, again, a wet game, a little bit of argy-bargy in it. How did you see this one, Caleb?
Yeah, look, Fremantle, they're one of those teams that in recent weeks that we've been causing or saying a lot of criticism towards them because they haven't been living up to the expectations that everyone thought that they could. And they're sitting around the edge of the top 8 right now. And with teams like Gold Coast dropping points and other teams around that sort of spot, if they're going to creep their way in, they've got to be beating teams like Essendon and GWS and Sydney and Port Adelaide, those other teams that are competing for those same spots. So Fremantle getting the job done in less than ideal circumstances, I think is very important for them. And from what I saw of the fourth quarter, it just was a boring game. Like Fremantle just were in cruise control. Essendon couldn't lay a glove on them. And from a neutral's perspective, I don't have much more to add.
They're now up to 6th spot, Freo. So they are tied with GWS, Adelaide and Hawthorn. But obviously percentage is going to play a big part in this. But they are only they're only 1% off from Hawthorn. So they're almost tied exactly with a team that you'd think people would say has had a pretty good season in Hawthorn. And so Freo obviously being down a little bit, people were saying, oh, what are they? Flake mantle, flag mantle, that sort of narrative. They're actually not that far off. And I feel like it's just string a couple of good wins together. That's all it takes to get some form in this AFL. But a little bit of a somewhat easier victory, especially against a team that is basically a VFL side at this point. But I think we're going to move along very quickly to the game of the round. We are the pride of
Brisbane Town.
Wearing maroon and gold, and we smashed the Geelong Cats 92-51. Unapologetically Lions heavy on this episode because absolutely no one gave us a chance in this one, myself included. Many people were like, after what we showed and threw up the last couple of weeks, we are absolutely back in terms of it looked so on from the first quarter. Cam Rayner had a really good spoil in the first quarter. Kai Lohman having a couple of good marks, Speckies. All these sort of things just kind of give you a sense that we're on in that way, and it didn't help that Geelong. Sorry, it helped us that Geelong were way off. How did you see this one, Caleb? We watched this one together, so we kind of had a similar experience.
100%. And it's one of those things with both of our lives, working weekends and whatnot. We're not always able to consume as much footy as we can. So it was a good opportunity to sort of just get to sit back, relax, and have a beer and watch the footy with you on Friday night. But for this particular game, coming into it, like you said, wasn't very confident. Geelong are a pretty comprehensive outfit. And going to GMHBA Stadium, we've not won there since 2003. And I was just like, it's probably going to be another one for the history books. But it was one for the history books, but in the opposite way. And the fact that Brisbane were able to put up an elite 4-quarter performance, the first time they've done that this season, was mightily impressive. And I was so grateful to watch them play a great game of footy.
Yeah, it was Paddy Dangerfield's 350th, Tyson Stengel's 100th, but no one cares about that because they played terribly. And I think that the whiteout
Yeah.
concept from Geelong is never going to be seen again,
Mhm.
because those t-shirts are going to be thrown in the trash and probably burned by some of those fans because it did not work out for them at all. It seemed like from the broadcast, like not many people were actually even wearing them. Either they were too big, it's cold down there. So, like, what if you had a big jumper on and you're like, oh, well, I can't fit this over my jumper? That sort of thing it was interesting. It kind of worked, I guess. Most people were wearing them, but you know what? It might just be a tax write-off for Cotton On, which speaks a bit more to the Geelong being a money laundering business somehow. That's how they're able to get Bailey Smith and Jeremy Cameron so easily. But anyway, Jeremy Cameron, speaking of him, he did have a decent game, but he was the only one, it seemed like.
Yeah.
And Logan Morris, another standout performance.
Yeah, he was great.
We
Back-to-back
had
games, kicking 5+ goals, which is awesome.
Kai Lohman had a good game. Charlie Cameron was okay, but I think that this opens up a larger conversation on his future, especially because Will McLaughlin came in and actually performed pretty well. Not crazy good, like he took a couple good
A
marks.
great mark.
Didn't kick a goal, but yeah, interesting. I think his athleticism is probably more of a weapon to the Lions at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's one of those things. The exuberance of youth can sometimes be beneficial, but at the same time, I feel like you need to sprinkle in youth very strategically because you
Yep.
look at some teams like North Melbourne and Essendon who are filled with young kids and they're not able to be a comprehensive team outfit. Whereas Brisbane, in terms of team squad age, are definitely towards the older side now. And a lot of players are in their prime. And then we've got experienced players like Lockie Neal and Charlie Cameron. So bringing in someone like McLaughlin, who is impressing in the VFL, maybe the person to replace Charlie Cameron, we don't know. But, when you've got players like Lincoln McCarthy, who, is not probably going to be coming back into the team and hitting high spirits.
Yeah.
Charlie Cameron's certainly not getting any better. Dane Zorko's definitely on the way out. He's definitely not got too many years left. So there's definitely going to be room in this squad, but it's just a question of whether he's able to hit those highs like the players before him have.
Yeah, I just think you look at the forward line is very young. Eric Hipwood, if Charlie Cameron was out, Eric Hipwood would probably be the oldest one, depending if like Darcy Gardner or someone came into the forward line. Sam Day, if you're going to consider him a forward, is pretty experienced. I just think that we could afford to have more athleticism in the forwards. I just think that Charlie Cameron somewhat has underperformed, to say the least, in the last couple of years, and yes, he provides more than just goals, but at this point, I think we could at least give it a run. Like, I don't know, maybe if he doesn't come back well next game, which is against Port Adelaide on the 5th of July, we'll just going to have to keep talking about it. And the more it happens, the more that we talk about it, what are we going to do? Put him to the VFL, maybe perhaps give him a run like against some lower opposition, get some confidence, because goals are about confidence a lot of the time. I don't know.
Very true.
What do you think? Is that going to do more harm than good?
It's one of those things. I feel as a player, legacy is so important, and you want to finish your career going out on a high. You don't want to have such a great, memorable career, and then towards the tail end, your form drops off so significantly that that's what people remember you for.
Yeah.
And Charlie Cameron's an icon of the Brisbane Lions. To be a premiership winning forward and have contributed so much and created a stadium atmosphere with his song that's become so iconic. It's massive, and we want to see him do well.
Yeah.
I don't think taking him out of the team this season is going to be the right call.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't hit the highs for the rest of the season, the next season, question marks need to be raised significantly.
But overall, a great performance from the Lions, and hopefully we can continue this form against, as I said, Port Adelaide coming up. And then we've actually got a very kind of hard schedule towards the end of the year. Another game against Collingwood, another game against GWS, I think, and also a game against Gold Coast. So some still very big games coming up. But we move on to the Saturday afternoon, which was The
Jesus.
Collingwood, the
Can you
Carlton game.
believe it,
This
mate?
is a
Oh
crazy.
my
This was a
goodness.
crazy game. So basically, one of the funniest timelines I've seen. You look at how much of a lead North got out to, and then you look at the score. Just look down in the bottom right where the North score was at the third quarter, and look at the score at the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
It's
wow.
exactly the same. And despite being 40 points down, they still couldn't come back from that without the other team scoring in the fourth quarter was Carlton. So, yeah, this was wild. And I think real questions have to be asked about the coach of Carlton. If not, people have been asking questions for a while, but this is pretty
Okay.
ridiculous at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because this is the big dilemma right now. Is it coming from the top end and is it
Yeah.
filtering down, or are the players just not rising to the level that they should be? Because Carlton Football Club, I had such high expectations
Me
for them
too.
coming into this season. I thought they were going to be like, after the years they've had, Michael Voss has been building something. The belief is back within the group. The fans are all really energized and excited. And this season has just gone absolutely belly up. It's imploded. And look, North Melbourne, I want to give some credit to, because they've actually,
Yeah.
even though they're towards the bottom,
Yeah.
they have put in some really good performances against some solid teams. And the fact that they were able to blitz Carlton in the second and third quarter is really commendable.
Mm-hmm.
However, the fact that, Michael Voss gave him a spray at 3/4 time and the
A big
Blues
spray.
were able to somehow conjure a level of determination for that fourth quarter, I think, personally, says more about the players than it does about the coach. Because there's three
ultimately
quarters
the
leading up
players
to that,
have
and
to go
then
and
the
play.
fourth they decide to start playing and put something together.
Yeah.
So question marks need to be asked of the players, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. So, yeah, I don't know. If you're a Carlton fan, I have multiple
You'd be
Carlton fans in my
spitting
life.
chips, mate. Oh my God.
You'd be absolutely ropeable about this season. I think it's, you know, the expectations far outweighed the results. So, man, it's going to be a crazy, crazy off season. See what Carlton have to do, and hopefully North Melbourne can, kind of be a bit of more of a, getting ahead of the game.
Do you think this is a season over for Carlton? Because they're now 8 points off getting into the top 8. The other teams around them, like Sydney and Port Adelaide, I think are in better form than them.
I'd say
and
it's
all
not.
the teams above them are definitely have a better chance of making the 8. So I
I'd say
think
it's
this could
not.
be.
But I think 7 or 8 is the highest they could get if they string like 3 or 4 wins together. I mean, you're running out of time. You got round 16 next, so it's going to be interesting to see. But our next game was two teams that I think we can definitely write off Port Adelaide. We're talking about Carlton being off, but I think Port Adelaide, very disappointing season, had somewhat high expectations. But yeah, this season has been pretty dire for them up against a Sydney team who has also had a pretty dire season. But they scored 17 points, had 9 goals. Joel Amati kicked 1 goal, 6. He had 9 set shots, and speak of that efficiency. So a little bit frustrating when it comes to his performance, but they eventually got the win, kind of just cruised at Adelaide Oval. So disappointing for Port. Sydney, I think they're still a ways off, and I think that even if they could make finals, they should just try and just take the time off, just go and rest, just retool again for next year. I think that's the main motto that I would be saying if I was a Sydney fan. What do you say?
Well, this is what I find most interesting about a lot of these clubs in this predicament right now. Because you look at Carlton, who are in 10th, Sydney, Port Adelaide, Essendon, all on 24 points. And I would say out of those 4 teams, Sydney is the most likely to make a run for the 8. I would happily say Carlton, Port Adelaide, and Essendon have no chance of making the 8, even though they're all on the same points, just based off how well they've performed this season, their consistency, and their level of intensity across all 4 quarters. I still think Sydney, if they're able to get the puzzle pieces together, are able to make a run and get some wins under the belt and push for a top 8 spot. So the fact that they won this game is huge for them, especially away from home. They had to get the job done. And even though I don't think they will, based off what I've seen so far this season, I think out of those teams in amongst it, Sydney is the best chance to get into the 8.
Right. Okay. I think that they might get into the eight, but I don't think that they're going to be doing anything. I don't know. I just don't see it this year. I think that they should just try and retool, maybe have one finals game. But yeah, I just think that they'd probably be better off if you could choose, maybe just missing the eight this year and getting out to a bit of an earlier rest and get more of a preseason under some of these players. Because again, they played in the grand final, so they had like 5 weeks less recovery from the season than the other teams that were below them. Speaking of like Adelaide and some, think of Adelaide last year, just missed out, you know, then came back and kind of had a good year this year. But speaking of teams that had that bounce back, you got Collingwood right there. That is a big win for them against St Kilda, as you can see on the worm. That was pretty tight towards the end of the second quarter, but then they kind of kicked away at the end, as they kind of have been doing. It's kind of their pattern. They just boop, 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 little jabs and then bam, just uppercut a team out of there. So I think again, it's another kind of solid win for Collingwood. They stay top of the ladder. Saints again, a little bit of an effort, but nothing crazy. I don't really have much else to say about this one. Did you watch any of it?
No, I didn't, and I don't also have much else to say. The only thing I'll add to wrap up on this game is the fact that because Carlton and Michael Voss has been gaining so much media attention with how much they've underperformed, I really do think Ross Lyon and St Kilda are flying under the radar.
That's
because true. They have been just as poor, if not worse.
Yeah.
And Ross Lyon should be getting more attention.
But it's the expectation, I think. It's the expectation. Did people expect Sydney to be good? Probably not. St Kilda to be good? Probably not. But Carlton, people expected them to be good, and they're not. So it's kind of a bit of a difference there. We had two games on Sunday, which was the Expansion Cup, GWS defeating the Suns in an 8-goal last quarter, which is crazy. Coming back and defeating the Suns. Look at that worm. The Suns had like
that
a 40,
orange tsunami, eh?
They almost had a 50-point lead. They almost put up 50 points in the first quarter and had a big lead. And then they continued out into the second quarter and then third quarter. And then, bam, fourth quarter comes along. The Suns score 3 goals in the last quarter, but the Giants scored 8. And man, this was insane. A bit of a, how do I describe it? A tsunami. Let's just call it that. I think that was pretty wild. But man, I can't believe that the Suns again are doing it again. Like, why I say I can't believe it, but I can believe it because I predicted that they wouldn't be very high up on the ladder, and I think this is a showing that they're still got a little bit of ways to go. What do you think?
Well, if they are to miss out on the 8, it'll be the biggest failure of this season, I think. To have had such a good start, to have the momentum so firmly going in your direction, to have players coming into the team that have got experience and are consistently good, and to have Damien Hardwick have got the foundation right, and now they're building on it. To not be in the top 8 this season, I think, is a catastrophic failure for them.
Yeah.
Losing to GWS away from home, in my opinion, is not like that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But it's the way they lost the game. The fact that they just capitulated so severely in the fourth quarter is really embarrassing. And normally it's GWS that does that in the fourth quarter.
Well, I think that, this keeps GWS in the 8, and it also drops the Gold Coast out of the 8, but they do have one game in hand. So, and it's a game against Essendon. So take from that what you will. Essendon have not been very good in the latter parts of the year, the last couple of years. So we'll see what happens there. But I think that Gold Coast definitely got some work to do. They do have a fair few home games coming up, but man, this was very disappointing if you're a Gold Coast fan. All 25 of them will be very disappointed. Sorry,
look, this is definitely the cut of whoever can get the most people in a stadium, and it's not very many. So.
They shouldn't call it the Expansion Cup. They should call it the Free Tickets Cup.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry, Gold Coast and GWS. We'll move on to the next game, which was the last game, which I think is probably might hold the record for the least talked about game of the round. Out of all the podcasts that I've kind of heard, no one's really talking about this because the Bulldogs absolutely trounced the Tigers, and there really wasn't much else to say. Like, Bulldogs had Bontempelli had a good game. Sam Darcy again looked like a freak. All of these things just racked up, and the Tigers just looked terrible. Like, this game was pretty bad. Anything to add to this one, Caleb?
Nah, I thought this was a foregone conclusion from the start. So up the doggies. That's all I'll say.
That leaves us with a ladder that's looking like this. So Collingwood on top, Brisbane on second place there with again 2 points above because we had a draw in there against North Melbourne. Geelong sitting there at 40 points. 36 is what the Crows, Hawks, Freo, and Giants have, and then you've got Western Bulldogs there sitting in the 8. Anything that stands out with that top 8 to you, Caleb?
Not particularly. I think it's all pretty well deserved where the teams are at the moment. There's no one that's like, they don't deserve to be there. They're punching above their weight. I think it's all pretty accurate from what we've seen so far this season.
Yeah, I think that it's been a pretty unchanged 8 for a while. Obviously, Collingwood, Brisbane, Geelong, Adelaide all been in there. Hawks were up there a bit further. Freo kind of came in late in the last couple of weeks. GWS have been there for a while, and I think we're going to see that fight for the 8th spot with the teams that are sitting just below them, which is Gold Coast, which are first time out of the 8 for the year. Carlton, like I said, I don't think it's season over, but yeah, they are sitting 8. There is a little bit of it might become just a straight shootout between, Freo, GWS, Bulldogs, and Gold Coast for that last spot, which will be very, very interesting. Anything that stands out for I'm not even going to go down to the bottom ones because we already know it hasn't changed in the last 4 weeks.
Yeah. No, look, all I'll say is I think Gold Coast definitely have to reverse the bad form that they're in. Having 3 L's in a row is not good. And if the morale changes that quickly, I think it could lead to a case of the wheels falling off the bus very quickly. And the Gold Coast definitely don't want that if they're going to build something significant this season. But all I'll say is in terms of the games coming up, Carlton versus Port Adelaide, a massive game in the context of their seasons. And the fact that, Friday night footy is delivering another huge contest. If Sydney are able to win this game, their season is still alive. Oof. If the Doggies win this game, they are, in my opinion, firmly set to be top 8 contenders this season.
Yeah.
And of course, Gold Coast, they should beat Melbourne. There's no excuse not to. But if they don't, it's a big, big story.
Yeah, I think that if Melbourne win that game, I think Gold Coast will slip even further down, and especially it's at home, so a little bit interesting there. Sydney, I think that I would pick out of those. Obviously, Western Bulldogs are the ones that I would pick, but I think it'll be closer than what we think. Man, that Thursday night game, I think if you projected that at the start of the year, you'd probably be like, oh yeah, that'd be a good one. Nah, I don't think so. Like in terms of
I think it'll be similar to the Port Adelaide. No, what was it? Yeah, Melbourne Port Adelaide game the other week.
Yeah.
Where the level of football in terms of quality wasn't very high, but the energy and desire was definitely there because it felt like there's something to play for here. It's felt like an elimination final, even though the football wasn't that great. Yeah. So I think this one has the same ingredients in terms of it being a fiercely contested battle between 2 teams that are not the best in the competition, but have something to play for still.
Yeah.
And I think Carlton will win, but if they don't, I do genuinely think that it will be season over for them, and Michael Voss might be in big, big trouble.
I think he's already in big, big trouble, but man, we'll move on to the next slate of games. Again, there are still some buys happening, so we still have less games than we would normally have, and the Hawks are playing North Melbourne, which will actually be a very spicy kind of game over in Launceston. You've got Collingwood versus West Coast, which is going to be a smashing for Collingwood. Not sure why this game is on at prime time. I'd probably prefer to see Hawthorn versus Melbourne on that one, North Melbourne. But anyway, and then Richmond versus Adelaide. Again, we should probably see Adelaide winning that game pretty easily. What do you think about these ones?
Compared to your previous slide, I think all of these are foregone conclusions as well. I don't anticipate any upsets here. I think it's all going to be pretty run-of-the-mill.
It doesn't look like great games this week, to be honest.
Yeah, like besides the Thursday and Friday night footy, none of this really excites me.
Even Freo St Kilda.
But I think the bye for Brisbane and Geelong this weekend has come at a good time.
Yeah.
So I think those 2 teams will definitely reset and come again in future weeks with some strong momentum.
Yeah.
But in terms of how the table shapes up for the rest of this season, there's going to be lots of eyeballs planted on a few different teams, and I'm very excited to see how it all shapes up.
It's going to be, we're getting towards the pointy end, as I like to say. And man, this has been a wild season. 15 rounds down now, going into round 16. They're going to I don't know. How's your feeling been about the season so far? Like, have you enjoyed most of the season? Take away from Lions fandom, but just in the overall scheme of things, has there been as many good games as you had hoped?
To be honest, the answer to that question is no.
Yeah.
I have been disappointed by a lot of games in terms of the close score lines.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen some good football and some really exciting tactical play, but a lot of the score lines have been 20, 30 or blowouts.
Yeah.
Not a lot of games decided by 6 points or less. And that's what you want from a neutral's perspective, especially. So from that perspective, I've been a bit disappointed. But in terms of, individual teams, there's been lots that have severely disappointed me. I look at Carlton, I look at Essendon, and they're big disappointments. And in terms of the up and comers, you got to give credit to North Melbourne, even though they're amongst the bottom, but they're still got a long way to go. But in terms of what's happening for the rest of this season, I'm very, very excited to see how it all wraps up.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a good end to the season. I think this middle part has been a little bit so-so, not that many good games. This is not tied to Lions fandom where we've had a bit of a rough patch. Just not been some great games, like I can't really get myself up for a Freo St Kilda, on a Sunday afternoon. Like there's just those kind of games, and I think that you just need to focus on some of the key matchups. But yeah, man, that's round 15 in the books, and soon it's going to be round 16, and then soon they're going to have a grand final, and then soon someone's going to win that grand final.
Yeah.
And then soon they're going to start the next season, and then they're going to continue that until we're dead.
And then Tasmania will hopefully come into the competition.
After we're dead. But again, thank you so much for joining me, Caleb. Thank you so much to everybody for watching. We'll see you next week on the Goldens AFL podcast. Thank you so much. Have a good day.